Okay, let's get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Yo Antah Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akhila Shakti Daraswadamnam अन्यांश्च प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So welcome to the 34th session on Kata Upanishad. I was just thinking about Kata Upanishad this morning, and we actually started the Kata Upanishad in December 2021. So we have been doing constant contemplation on the philosophy of Krishna Yajur Veda for about 14 months. And we are slowly getting close to the final sections of this Upanishad. Okay. So, hang on. So, yes. So what were we doing in this Valli? So we are looking at the second Adhyaya, third Valli, and we have covered quite a bit of it. We are almost, we are halfway through the third Valli. So last week, what did we say? What did we discuss? Yata adarshe tata atmani, yata swapne tata pitruloke, yata apsu pari iva drishe tata gandharva loke, chaya tapo iva brahmaloke. Indriyanam pritak bravam udaya astamayo chayat Prutak utpatyamananam matva dhiro na sochati. Indriyebhyah param mano manasa sattvam uttamam. Sattvadi mahanatma mahato avyaktam uttamam. Avyaktattu paraha purushaha. This is where we stopped last week. We've closed with avyaktattu purusha paraha. And this verse goes on. Vyapako alingaye cha nyam nyatva muchyate jantuhu amrutatvam cha gacchati. So we will start off with completing this verse, and then we have about 4 to 5 verses to do today. Let's see how time takes us and how the discussions are going to be before we close today's session. So, what is the verse here? Indriyebhyah paramano manasaha sattvam uttamam sattvadi mahanatma mahatoho avyaktam uttamam avyaktattu paraha purushaha. Okay, so let's just revise this particular verse. So the first thing that we said is, yes, you can say take this chariot, and you can take the chariot's metaphor and understand how this body is, how the various indriyas is, then how the mind is important, and then how the intellect is important, and how beyond the intellect there is another principle, and beyond the avyakta principle there is this purusha. So that is from a very superficial perspective, but that is not what Vedic philosophy is, as you know, and that is not what Kata Rishi is telling us, and that is not what Yama is telling Nachiketa here. There is a deeper philosophy. Abhimani vyapadeshastu visesha anugatibhyam. And this is the language of the Upanishads, and this is the language of the Vedas, that wherever you see what appears to be a non-sentient principle, there is always a sentient tattva behind it. So in this example, indriyebhyah param manaha, indriyas. Who is the head of all the indriyas? It is our Devendra. Okay, so Devendra is the Indriya's head of all the Indriyas. So can somebody tell us here, what does the word Devendra actually means? Anybody wants to share ideas about why do we call this Indra as Devendra? Anybody wants to answer that question? Let me switch on my light here. Okay, that's better. So Deva actually means, the Deva has got a lot of meanings here. One meaning of Deva is all the sense organs. Okay, and the head of all the sense organs is this Indra. Okay, so that is why he is called Devendra. Okay, and Indra is the Abhimani Devata of which organ in our body? That's my next question. Who wants to take that? which particular Indriya is the Indra head of?
Hand.
Hand, very good. Yes, hand. Hand is the most important Indriya that we have as humans, because we are talking about sadhana sharira here, okay? We're not talking about animals. This is about our sadhana sharira. And as Sushruji very correctly pointed out, hand abhimani is Indra, and hand is the most important Indriya, whether you like it or not, because the whole of the human civilization has evolved because of the hands, because of the dexterity of our fingers and the ability of us to make tools. And based on the ability to make tools, the whole civilizations have evolved. So the Vedic view is absolutely right. Vedic rishis always felt this karma indriya, which is the hand, is the most important indriya for sadhana. And they gave Indra Devata as the abhimani of the hands. So the verse then said, beyond the hands is the manas, and the abhimani, as you know, of manas is Garuda Sesha Rudra. So in this, let's also think about the Vedic pantheon and the Vedic ranks. The Vedic pantheon rank of Indra is 8th rank, and then above him is the manas. Manas is Garuda Sesha Rudra. They are the head of the mind, and they are the abhimanis of the mind. So their Vedic rank is 5th. So that makes perfect logical sense that the 5th rank is above the 8th rank. Then you have the Buddhi. Buddhi, as we also discussed last week, is also called Sattvam. Okay? The Abhimani of Sattvam is Saraswati and Bharati. And their Vedic rank is 4th rank. Okay? Again, makes a lot of sense. 4th rank is superior to the 5th rank. And then beyond Saraswati Bharati is the Chaturmukha Brahma, who is the Chitta or Mahanatma, as he has been called here. Chitta is the memory shell. Okay? So Abhimani of the memory shell is Chaturmukha. And Chaturmukha is the 3rd rank. So logically, 3rd rank is above the 4th rank. Then the Yama says, higher than the Chaturmukha is Avyaktam Uttamam. And last week we also discussed about why Shri Tattva Lakshmi is also called Avyakta Tattva. And the Avyaktam Uttamam because she is the 2nd rank. And then Kata Rishi last week told us Avyakta tu Paraha Purushaha. Okay. Beyond the Avyakta Tattva is this Purusha. And then we know when we have done Purusha Shukta and Mahanarayana Upanishad, for example, says Purusho Havai Narayanaha. Yeah, Mahanarayana Upanishad is the extension of the Taittiriya Upanishad. It comes in the same shaka. Now, once the Taittiriya Upanishad closes, Mahanarayana Upanishad starts afterwards, and the Mahanarayana Upanishad categorically says Purusho Havai Narayana. And of course, we have done a lot of sessions about what Purusha actually means and so on. So we all know that Purusha is Narayana himself. Okay, so we understood this ladder, the ladder in which we use our body as a sadhana sharira and go towards Narayana. This ladder has got 18 steps. And that we know from Shat Prashna Upanishad. So again, I wanted to emphasize these ideas, they are recurrent themes in the Upanishads. Yeah. And the fact that we have done much of this before makes our journey today much more easier, as you will find. So there are lots of similar concepts that we will be dealing with today. Okay. So coming back to here, Avyakta tu Paraha Purushaha. And then Kata Rishi then says immediately, Vyapako Alinga Evacha. So who is this Purusha? That is the question. So the Yama then qualifies who this Purusha is. This Purusha is, there are 2 ways of splitting this. Yeah. So this Sandhi can be split into 2 ways. Purushaha Avyapakaha, Purushaha Vyapakaha, Purushaha Avyapakaha. So this Purusha has got he does 2 things. One is he is Vyapaka. Vyapaka means what? Vyapaka means he is everywhere. Okay? So that is an idea that we know. Omnipresence is something that is very familiar to all of us, having read the Upanishads over the last couple of years. That one of the definitions of Brahman is that he is all pervasive. He is omnipresent. So here, why is Kata Rishi saying Vyapaka? The reason why he's saying here is All these Abhimani Devatas are there, right? And we've had the 17 Abhimani Devatas that we have discussed here. And Yama or Kata Rishi, they say, in all these, they are all souls. And in all these souls is the Antaryamin. He is Vyapaka in all of these. Okay, so that is the first idea that Yama wants to remind us. So in this chapter, there is a lot of revision from previous chapters. So can anybody tell me here, there was a similar verse in the Kata Upanishad, which I'll give you a hint. It is a Gayatri, where Kata Rishi has spoken about how this supreme being is all pervasive in all the tattvas, tattva abhimanis. So who wants to answer that? This is just to wake up rapid quiz. So which Gayatri is it?
Is it Hamsa Gayatri?
Yeah, okay. So Padmaja's household is right. So Hamsa Gayatri. So in the Hamsa Gayatri, he has actually said that Hamsa Suchishat, Vasu Antarikshasat, Kota Vedishat, Atitir Dronashat, Drishat, Varashat, Ritashat, Vyomashat, Abja, Goja, Adrija, Ritaja, Ritam, Bruhat. So he has said this beautiful verse, and of course we spent I think 2 or 3 weeks talking about this. And he said Hamsa Suchishat, this Hamsa Namaka Paramatma is in the highest of the jivas, and the highest of the jivas is called Suchi. Suchi, he who is very pure, and we understood who that pure entity is. So that has been dealt with before, but here Yama reminds us again, so that this Purusha, who is the highest, he is inside all others. Okay, he is inside all of them. You know, I've even put Lakshmi here. I shouldn't put this red blobs because Lakshmi is also all pervasive as Narayana. But the idea here is the all pervasiveness of Narayana is also dependent on the all pervasiveness of Shri Tattva is also dependent on Narayana. So in that sense, Narayana is always there in Lakshmi also, and also Chaturmukha, Saraswati, Bharati, Garuda, Rudra, and all other Abhimani Devatas that we have. So those are all the ideas of Purushaha Vyapakaha. So we know the various Upanishads where we have understood why our philosophy talks about all pervasiveness. Look, check out this Taittiriya Upanishad where I've always said Tadeva Anupravishat. Look at the Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So these are all the evidences that we should recollect when Yama says Purusho Vyapako. Okay. But this Purusha himself is Avyapaka. So that is interesting. So what that does mean is, so this Purusha is an Antaryamin of all the Jivas. So some person may ask, is there anything which is an Antaryamin of Narayana himself? Okay. Can somebody else be an Antaryamin of Narayana? So that is a question that can arise, isn't it? So there, our Vedic philosophy says, that is the final point. Purushan na param kinchit sakashta saparagatihi. That has been discussed before. So to bring back that idea, here Kata Rishi says, this Purusha is avyapaka. He says that this vyapakatva stops with Narayana, because Narayana, that is it. He is not dependent on anybody. He is an independent being. He doesn't have an antaryamin. He is avyapakaha. Whereas all others have him as vyapakaha as their antaryamin. Okay, so this is the key concept of Vedic philosophy. Swatantram aswatantram dvividam tattvamishyase swatantro bhagavan Vishnu. Okay, I'm going to come back to these verses for the rest of the class. So hold on to these great verses. Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Nya agnyau dvav anishav kshara atma ishate deva yekaha. Okay. So that independent nature of Brahman that makes him avyapakaha, again, we need to understand what is that idea of independent is. And again, I'm never tired of reminding us all, what is the definition of independence? No other world philosophy has actually gone into the great depths of actually defining what is the meaning of independence of Brahman. What is that independent? It is not like 1947, India got independence. That is not the independence that we are talking about. The independence from a philosophical perspective is an entirely different ball game. So what do the Shastras define independence as? Swarupa, Pramiti, Pravriti, Lakshana, Satta, Traividye, Para Anapeksham Swatantram, Tad Apeksham Aswatantram. So this is the classic definition. So what does that mean? The essential nature of a thing, the power of knowing or becoming known, and the power to act. So these four things, for Narayana, he is not dependent on anybody for this. His essential nature, his power of knowing or becoming known, and his power to act. He is not dependent on anybody. Whereas all other entities in the universe will be dependent on Narayana for these. Yeah. So that is why Narayana is an independent entity in Vedic philosophy, and all others are dependent. So when Yama says, this Purusha, Purushoha vai Narayanaha, he is avyapakaha, but also vyapakaha for all these entities that I've just described. I've listed all these entities, and this is what Yama is getting at. So we understood what vyapaka and avyapakaha means. Let us look at what this one looks. This is interesting. Alinga evacha. So who is this Purusha? He is not only vyapaka and avyapaka, but he is also alingaha. Okay. Look at the word eva. Eva there stresses. He is alinga. Okay. So what does that word alinga mean? So this is where I want to just open up for some discussions for today. Okay. Purusho vyapako alinga evacha. So alinga, linga means that logic is called linga in philosophy. Logic and reasoning, they are all called lingas. So alinga. So this Yama says that this Purusha is beyond logic or reasoning. Okay, so this is again a familiar idea to us in this forum of what that actually means. When we say God is beyond logic or reasoning, what do I mean? So to understand that, we need to go back to our basics, and it's always good to revise the basics because we need to have strong fundamentals, always. Yeah. So I'm going to just open up. What are the means of knowledge? So who wants to lead this discussion? So what are the means of knowledge in Vedic philosophy?
The Jnanendriyas.
Sorry, Harish, go ahead.
Oh, we're just saying Jnanendriyas.
Okay, you put Jnana Indriyas. Okay, so Harish, just expand that a little bit more. With Jnana Indriyas is a means of knowledge. So they give what kind of knowledge?
It's from the outside. So whatever you perceive from the external.
Yeah, wonderful. So it's a perception, right? So you're talking about perception as one means of knowledge, and that perception is all the various sense organs that we have. Suresh, you wanted to?
Is it Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama?
Yeah,
three.
Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. So Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama. So these are the means of knowledge. Okay. So these are all the three that we have at our disposal. And Yama says here that he is beyond reasoning, okay, beyond logic. So that is the Anumana. Anumana is logic and reasoning, okay. So Yama says this Purusha is beyond reasoning. So who wants to take that up? Why do we think that he is beyond reasoning? As I said here, Immanuel Kant, he's a big Western philosopher. He is also of the same view, critique of pure reason. God cannot be known by reasoning or logic. This is where our scientists fall down miserably, that they want to prove the existence or non-existence of God through logic or reasoning. But our philosopher Immanuel Kant, like our Yama, has said God is beyond reasoning. Why is that the case? Why is this Anumana cannot prove the existence of God? Categorically, for example. Who wants to take that up?
Madhu, is it because Anumana or logic is limited by our experience and our knowledge? If one is not ready to accept that there is beyond what we know or can be known, then Anumana will have limitations.
That's good.
It was because he's non-material.
Some background noise there. Devalji, do you want to go? Yeah.
Because he's non-material.
Because he is non-material. Excellent. Okay, so just expand on that idea. Because he is non-material, why does it make him beyond logic or reasoning? Okay, we briefly lost Deval there. No worries. So Deval is right. He's non-material. So Sureshji, as you mentioned, you were right in one sense, and Devalji is also right in another sense. Now Harish mentioned the means of knowledge is all these sense organs, right? And then the logic is what? Logic is also to some extent based on the sense organs. I mean, by and large, it is based on the sense organs. Yeah. So that is why it's called anumana. It is just a dependent proof. It is not an independent proof of anything. Because you have to see the smoke first. First thing you have to do about anumana is, if you want to have a logic saying that this mountain has got smoke because therefore it has fire, the first thing you should be seeing is you should be able to see the smoke. Smoke is dependent on what? You have to use your eyes to see the smoke. So in this situation, your knowledge of the fire is actually dependent on you perceiving the smoke first. And you must have also perceived the fire in a kitchen before that. So you need two perceptual knowledges to come to a conclusion for any logical reasoning. That is a minimum requirement. Yeah. So in that sense, you are dependent on something that you have to use your sense organs to perceive. And as Devalji mentioned, he is beyond material senses. So when he is beyond material senses, how can you use your material senses and to conclude this Purusha? Yeah. So that is the idea there when Yama says Purushaha Vyapako Alinga Evacha. And the same thing Kata Upanishad has discussed this in the very first Adhyaya, second Valli, which this very, very important verse, Naisha Tarkena Matihi Apaneya. Okay. Prokta Anyenaiva Suknanaya Preshta. So go back to that verse where this Tarka is Linga, Tarka is logic, and that is also called Linga. So here he says, Na Ishaha Tarkena Matihi Apaneya, which is exactly what Alinga is all about. So to conclude this verse, what Yama has told us in this verse is, Indriyebhyaha param mano manasaha sattvam uttamam sattvadi mahanatma mahato avyaktam uttamam avyaktattu paraha purusho vyapako alinga evacha. The one who knows this, yam nyatva muchyate jantuhu amrutatvam cha gacchati. Okay, easy words, clear, yeah? Yam nyatva, the one who knows. Muchyate, jantuhu means what? Jantuhu means you and me. The jivas, the ones that are now roaming around with sadhana shariras, they give up their material bodies. Amrutatvam cha gacchati. They move towards immortality. Yeah? Amrutatvam, there it can mean so many things. One is Amruta Tattvam or Amrutatvam. Amrutatvam is Mruta is dying again and again. Amruta means not dying ever again. So that is our liberation. Then Amruta Tattvam. Amruta means eternal bliss. So that thingy called the Amruta, that eternal bliss, they attain. Or Amruta means this Paramatma who is an abode of infinite bliss. He attains this Amruta Tattvam. Yeah, so there are so many ways of looking at that verse. So just because we now know that he is beyond logic does not mean we will immediately attain our liberation. That is not what Yama is telling. Yama is telling first you need to understand the basics here, that don't search for him outside. Okay, because you won't find him in the material world because he is non-material. Find him in the revealed scriptures that talk about him. Harish.
Yeah, so when you mentioned the beyond logic, that's interesting because I know in some interpretations it's also understood that it is it kind of describes that Purusha has no properties or no qualities. That's not what we're saying, right? I mean, I wanted to kind of emphasize the distinction here.
Yeah, thank you, Harish. Yeah, so when you say no qualities, again, no material qualities. Yeah, so if he's got no material qualities, that is fine when you say nirguna. And when you say Saguna, of course, he's full of non-material, infinite, auspicious attributes, which is what the definition of Brahman is all about. Thank you, Harish, for that very important reminder there. So the idea there is you really need to use the scriptures to try and find him. Yeah. So now he says, he qualifies what he has said before about the fact that he is Vyapaka, Avyapaka, but he's Alinga. Alinga means he's beyond logic because your mundane logic uses perception. And the perception involves material sense organs that look at material things. Yeah. So here Yama then immediately reminds us, Na sandrishe tishtati rupam asya, na chakshusha pashyati kashtana yenam. Okay, very easy for us to understand. So na sandrishe tishtati rupam asya. So we cannot perceive his rupa. Yeah, we can never have a full vision or a full perception of his rupa. Rupa means you can say his attributes, his aspects, and his forms, and his glories, and etc. You can never do this. And yes, of course, na chakshusha pashyati kashtidenam. So you cannot see him through your eyes. Yes, in this example, when you see through his eyes the smoke, you can infer the knowledge of the fire. But that is not how our supreme Brahman is, because he is non-material. You can use your eyes to see the material things. You can use the microscope to see microbes. You can see the Hubble Space Telescope to look at things far away in the universe. Or you can go to the CERN laboratory and break open the atoms and see what is there inside the atoms. But all these are material. Our Brahman is beyond matter. So na chakshusha pashyati kashtidenam. Okay. So, and our scriptures, there are empty number of evidences in the scriptures which claim this. And I've just listed 3 examples here. Paro matraya tanva vrudana nate mahitvam anvashnuvanti nate vishnoho jayamano najato deva mahimnaha paramantamapa. Paro matraya. This Vishnu is paro matraya. Matraya means tanmatras. Tanmatras means shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. These are all made of matter. This guy is beyond that. Paro matraya. This Vishnu tattva is paro matraya, says Rig Veda. So the same Purusha Shukta, we know this, right? Purusha eva idang sarvam yadbhutam yaccha bhavyam uta amrutatvasya ishanaha yat annena atirohati. So the anna there, atirohati means he is far beyond anna. Anna is matter. Yeah, anna there also means Shri Tattva Lakshmi. So he is far beyond that in that particular verse of Purusha Shukta. And our Veda Vyasa, of course, has made a very important sutra there. Arupavad evahi tat pradhanatvat. Arupavad. He's arupa means he doesn't have material form. Yeah. So this is where our Yama is taking us. Na sandrishe tishtati rupamasya, na chakshusha pashyati kashtidenam. So then we are stuck here. Then what then is the means of knowing the Supreme? Okay. So I'm going to open this up very briefly. So if we can never see him, in the eye with our eyes, then we should not be searching for him in our temples where we just go stand and clap our hands and look at somebody doing something and then come back, eat prasad and come back. We should not be searching for him outside because we can't see this guy. So what is the means of knowing the Supreme? Quick answer. So who wants to take this up?
Can I, Madhu, try?
Yes, please.
I thought it's only the grace of God which helps. It divinizes the senses to see him. Like Vishwarupa Darshan, he has said, Arjuna, that I will give you the vision to see me.
Yeah, beautiful, Shilaji. Thank you very much. Yeah, that grace is absolutely required. And yes, of course, in the next few verses, Yama is going to talk to us about this. Wonderful. Anybody else wants to say anything else here?
Jnana Chakshu.
Jnana Chakshushu. Yeah, okay. So what is the Jnana Chakshushu, Harish?
It is the inner intuition. Yeah, I mean, intuition is the way I would understand.
Okay, thank you guys. So yeah, excellent contribution. Jnana Chakshushu. We'll come back to that. So yeah, so as Sheila ji was mentioning, okay, this is important. Why, how can we, what is the means of knowing the Supreme? Yeah, with me searching in various temples and elsewhere, is that where I'm going to see this Brahman? No is the categorical answer from Yama to Nachiketa. Yama says, Hruda, Manisha, Manasa, Abhiklupto, Ya etad viduhu, Amrutaste bhavati. So the last line is easy, but the first line we need to be thinking about this. Hruda, Manisha, Manasa, these are the three words. These are important words. And in these three words, Yama has actually summarized the whole of the Vedic philosophy of what is the that method. What is that method by which we can see him? Yeah. How should our upasana be? That is the idea. That is the key idea. There is what is our upasana here? So he says Hruda. Okay. Hruda means Hruda has got two meanings. Yeah. So Hruda in one meaning is mind. Mind is also called Hruda. Okay, so we say you think through your brain, but you feel through your the heart, right? Your mind. So Hruda is mind, and what is that mind? Mind in a sattvika state. The mind, the pure mind in the sattvika state that goes towards Shreyas. Yeah, that is the first thing that we need. Yeah, that is the very first requirement. Is that think about that chariot. The chariot where the manas is the reins, isn't it? The reins of the chariot which controls the horse. So that rein first has to be controlled, and that rein has to be controlled in such a way that it is always in a sattvika state. Okay, and who wants to come here and talk and tell us briefly about what is it that Krishna has advised us in Bhagavad Gita about the sattvika state of our mind? And in which chapter has Krishna mentioned that? So please contribute here, please. That state of mind as the sattvika state, the rajasa state, and the tamasa state as described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. So who wants to go there, or shall I pick somebody? Neeta? Suresh, yeah, go for it.
Is it chapter 17, Shraddha Gunatraya Vibhaga?
Yes, of course, absolutely. And also in 18th chapter, he also talks about this. Any other ideas about the state of mind? Okay, no worries. So yeah, you're right, Suresh, 17, 18 and other places, of course, everywhere he talks about the status of mind, right? In all chapters, there is always some aspect of the mind that comes in. But as Suresh ji rightly pointed out, certain chapters focus on this much more. So that is sattvika mind, but having that sattvika mind is not an easy business. Yeah, and it probably needs millions of births and so much of sadhana that we have to do in our daily life to achieve this state. But that is the primary requirement. There is no other way around it. We need that state first. That Hruda is the first requirement. And also that Hruda, that sattvika state will take us all to Hruda. So that Hruda means Preeti, or the love of God. Okay. So that Preeti, or the love of God, is the next most important requirement. So says Yama. Okay. So this Hruda, I was just interested because this word Hruda should not be confused with other things like Hrit. Hrit is heart, yeah, and Krishna has of course said, I am inside the middle portion of the heart. I am in the thymus. I am here, and I am also inside the jiva. Jivas have their middle portion. I am inside that as their antaryami. So that is Hrit, whereas here it is Hrida. So they should not be confused. And one of the ways of remembering this is, of course, if somebody wants to recite the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, where there is that word Hrida, and I have underlined that. So who wants to recite the very first verse of Bhagavatam here? Anybody wants to take this up?
Shall I try, Madhu? I think I've
Yeah.
done it
Yeah,
before.
go for it.
Janmadyasya yatonvayaditaratashchakteshvabhignasvarat tene Brahma Vridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yasuraya Tejovar Mrudam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrusha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Thank you, Shilaji, as usual. Very, very beautifully recited. So, Tene Brahma Hruda ya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yat Surayaha. So that verse is of course that sets the base for the rest of the Bhagavatam, which is a huge piece of work. That Hruda is out of love. Okay, and out of love, this Paramatma instructs Chaturmukha Brahma. That is how the Bhagavatam goes. So Hruda there in Bhagavatam and the Hruda that Yama uses here are pretty much the same meaning. Hruda, okay, so the love of God or the bhakti. Okay, so the next question is, when do we start loving somebody more and more? So who wants to answer this one? When do we develop? Okay, it is all fair and square to say bhakti, okay, love. So is it blind love? Is it infatuation and blind love? Or we actually start loving somebody more and more only when we have achieved a certain level of something. So when do we start loving somebody more and more? So who wants to come here? And I've given the answer there itself. So the answer there is, we love somebody more and more only when we know about that person's greatness or their beauty or their extraordinary quality or things like that, the positive attributes. That is what makes us love somebody more and more. So the idea there is, when we know more and more about that person, then we start loving that person more and more. And that love is what is bhakti is all about, right? So we are very familiar with this idea. So the next question is, what is the process of knowing that person more and more? Okay. So to bring that idea, Yama beautifully puts this verse called Manisha. So Hruda, next is Manisha. So Manisha means Manisha, Mananashilaha, that one that contemplates, that thinks about things. What do we think about things? We don't think about something that is emptiness. We think about something, about some knowledge about something. And how do we acquire the knowledge of that person? We acquire the knowledge of the person through the scriptures, and then we do constant manana about this person. Yeah. So that is what we are doing here, and we have done it for 3 years, is that constant contemplation of that person, or constant manana, revision, going back and understanding the same ideas again and again from various scriptures. Okay. So when we get that knowledge, yeah, and that is why this verse is so important for Brihadaranyaka Upanishad between Yajnavalkya and his wife. Atmava are drashtavya, shrotavyo, mantavyo, nitidhyasitavyaha. So the shrotavya is we go to the guru and learn. Mantavya is once we have learned, we start, ruminating inside and constantly doing that manana and so on. So Manisha and then Manasa, deep contemplation of the Vedic truths. That is Nitidhyasitavya. You go into deep meditation, not thinking about some emptiness. Okay, that is for different schools, where they go to this state of what is called vipassana, where they want to meditate into emptiness. But what Yama is telling us here is that you go into the deep contemplation of the Supreme Brahman after having done the Shrotavya and Mantavya. Okay, so those are all the ideas that Yama is capturing here. Hruda, Manisha, Manasa. So when you do that, Abhikrupto. It's a tongue twister. Abhikrupto. So Abhikrupto means is revealed. Who? This Brahman is revealed by his grace. Yes. But to get his grace, you need to have certain qualifications. What is that qualification? The knowledge of him, the constant contemplation of him, the bhakti, the love of him. Because when you have that bhakti is when he will shed his grace, as Shilaji was mentioning. And without that grace, you're not going to be able to see him with your material eyes. So yes, of course, Jayatirtha said about the definition of bhakti, and I put it here because it's a beautiful verse to recite. Parameshwara bhaktir nama Niravadika, Ananta, Anavadya, Kalyana, Gunatva, Jnana, Purvakaha, Swatma, Atmiya, Samasta, Vastubhyo, Api, Ananta, Gunadiko, Antaraya, Sahasrena, Api, Apratibaddaha, Nirantara Prema Pravaha. This Nirantara Prema Pravaha is what this Hruda is all about. So he who knows this process, ya etad viduhu amrutaste bhavanti. So again, Yama is telling this is the process, Nachiketa, and through Nachiketa he is telling all of us, this is the process. Yeah, that Yama is categorically giving here, and Krishna Yajur is giving us here. And Krishna Yajur is Apaurusheya, is a source of supreme authority, which cannot be refuted. And this is the process that is described in Krishna Yajur. And I don't think we can have any second thoughts about it, because there is no shortcut to either seeing Brahman or reaching him. There is no shortcut here. There is a process. We need to understand that process, and that is what we have been doing here in this satsang, is that what is it our Vedas, what is this our Shastras is telling us, what is that process? And once we get that process in our mind, then we can go and, practically put that into practice. That process of manana, nitidhyasana, and so on. And then hopefully at some point we'll have the divine grace. But why are we not doing it at this point? Yada pancha avatishtante jnanani manasa saha buddhishtana vicheshtate tammahuhu paramam gatihi. Okay, so he says this very clearly. When would we do all this of this bhakti and this manana and so on? So to reach that process of, gaining knowledge and deep meditation, we need to do something here. We need to start somewhere, right? And that is what Yama is telling here. This is your first step. Because in Kata Upanishad, second Adhyaya, first Valli, and the very first verse, we have done this. This is an amazing verse. I think Suresh was hinting to this either last week or the previous week. Paranchikani vyatrinat swayambhuhu tasmat parang pashyati na antaratman kaschid dhiraha pratyagatmanam aikshat avrutta chakshushu amrutatvam ichchan. Okay. So our indriyas are always facing externally, like this horse. They are always facing externally. Our mind is always facing externally. Our intellect is always facing externally. And unfortunately, we as jivas are also facing externally. And we are using the sadhana sharira and constantly roaming around without any destination in the external world. So that is the fundamental fact. So here Yama says, Yada, when, pancha jnanani. Okay, so pancha jnanani. That is what Harish was mentioning just 2 slides before. Jnana indriyas. Pancha jnanani avatishtante. So what avatishtante means, close your eyes to the external world. That doesn't mean literally we close our eyes. It means don't give too much attention to this. Yeah, it serves a purpose and that is it, but that is not the end. It is just a means to certain things, comforts of life, but not that. So there are bigger things in life. To achieve bigger things in life, you have to shut your eyes at some point and all other senses. So yada pancha avatishtante jnanani, not just your external senses, manasa, even your mind. Because we may close our eyes, but still through our mind, we may be thinking about all sorts of nonsense. Yeah. So Yama says, even your mind, you need to close. Okay. To the external world. Buddhishta na vicheshtati, vicheshtate. Buddhi, not only this mind, but also this buddhi, the fellow who drives this chariot, the charioteer there. Buddhim tu saratim viddhi. Yeah. So that sarati also needs to stop constantly thinking about, oh, I will buy this, or this deal is good, this comes with an interest-free credit, oh, I will go and buy this, all that kind of stuff that we all do. Yeah. So we all do it all the time. But Yama is saying you need to stop doing that. Yeah. Buddhishta na vicheshtate. Okay, so he who does this. So remember, that is why this chariot metaphor is amazing. Chariot metaphor. Think about this all the time, because the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is compressed in this chariot. The whole, yeah, and the whole of the philosophy of Kata Upanishad is also compressed in this chariot. Because what he is saying is, when you close all these to the external world and when you start moving towards Shreyas, then you reach that great destination or the great state. This, they say, is the highest stage. Tam ahuhu paramam gatim. Yeah, so essentially, when your jnana indriyas shut or rest, and also the mind is switched off, and the intellect ceases to function. When you do that, when are you able to do this? You are able to do this only in deep contemplation, nitidhyasa, in the deepest of meditation when you can do it. And that requires a lot, maybe several births of practice. And there are some yogis who are able to do that great levels of meditation when they are able to close their intellect, their mind and their indriyas. Okay, so this shutting has happened. This contact of the soul with the external world comes to a halt. Yeah. So what Yama now says is, when you are able to do that, Nachiketa, that state people say as Paramam Gatim. That is one of the highest states that jivas can attain in their conscious states. Yeah. So what is that highest state called? So immediately Yama says that highest state, Tam yogamiti manyante. Yeah. Stiram indriya dharanam. Yeah. Beautiful verse. The whole of Gita, of course, is summarized here. Tam yogamiti manyante. When you reach that state where the external thingy is all shut and you are in that deep state, that state is called yoga. Yeah. Yogam. Tam yogamiti manyante. Okay. So, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Jiva making contact with Antaryaman. Yoga there means making contact, joining. So, yoga, as you know, has got various meanings. So can I just break for a minute? So, who is going to tell us the various meanings of yoga that we know from Bhagavad Gita, for example? So, because in the next 2 or 3 slides, we're going to have different aspects of yoga that comes in. So, what are the meanings of yoga? Who wants to take this up, please?
One meaning could be the means of achieving something.
Excellent. Upaya. Anything, any other meanings? The other one, of course, is to unite or to join something. So that is another meaning of yoga that we are doing right now. So what is the other yoga? So there is, I've got this verse here, 9:22. Who wants to recite that?
Yeah. Okay. I can recite that.
Yeah.
Ananyashchintayanto mam ye janah paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham.
Nice, Nitaji. So do you want to explain this verse and tell us what that yoga and kshema there mean?
It is about the knowledge. What he is doing is, Bhagavanta is doing is keeping our Adhyatma knowledge. He keeps it and also he helps us increase that knowledge. So that is what he's trying to explain in the Yoga Kshema, if I'm right?
Yeah, fantastic. So their yoga is, that is actually giving something that what you did not have before. So that is yoga. And kshema is once you have something to protect it and preserve it. That is kshema. So yoga in that sense is yoga in Kannada and Tamil, you say yogam. So you say that no, in colloquial language, they comes from that. So that yoga there means he's got something which is unusual, which he did not have before. So yoga has got various meanings. So let's revise what are all the various meanings. Upaya, that is means. So when I say Sankhya Yoga, it means it is a means of getting the knowledge of Sankhya, Samyak Khyati, correct knowledge. Okay. So the means of getting is one meaning of yoga. The other meaning of yoga is getting something which you did not get, which we did not have before. So that is another yoga. And the third yoga is where you are actually uniting with something, that uniting with the Paramatma, joining the Paramatma, that is another yoga. And then of course, you have the yogas of the various gyms that are going on at this point where you stretch a few things. That is also yoga. Okay. So there are various meanings there. So we need to carefully watch. The prakarana is important. So here, tam yogamiti manyante. So that state of deep meditation where the jiva has actually shut itself from the external world. Yeah. How is that described? Stiram indriya dharanam. All the indriyas. Eyes, your mind is also an indriya. Yeah. Your mind is the sixth sense organ, as you know. So all these things are made still. Okay. And Yama defines that state as yoga. Yeah. And what happens at that stage? Apramattaha tada bhavati. So this is a beautiful statement. Apramattaha. That state of yoga is described by Yama as apramattaha. Apramattaha literally means attentive, vigilant, careful, in the sense that the clarity is there at that point, the clarity of vision. Yeah, he is very attentive. That clarity of vision is there because the soul's vision is not clouded by any of the external things that's going on. So the soul becomes an apramattaha tada bhavati. Okay, so this is important. So here Yama is talking about the awakening of the third eye. Yeah, we have discussed this before. This is what Yama is talking about apramattaha tada bhavati means you wake your third eye at that point. So who wants to remind us what that waking up of the third eye actually means in this context? Okay. Yeah.
Is it that Jnana Chakshu that Harish was referring to?
Absolutely right. So that Jnana Chakshus that Harish was mentioning is the eternal indriya of the soul itself, the soul's Chakshus. So all that we have is we are using our material indriyas, whereas the soul itself has its non-material eternal indriya, and it is able to see, it opens up, the soul itself opens up and it starts seeing the Antaryamin, and at the same time it has that clarity of vision, which is, it has no delusions, it has no moha, it has no wrong knowledge. Yeah, that state is called apramattaha tada bhavati. Okay. So then he says yogo hi prabhava apyayo. So in that, this is interesting, and the various teachers and acharyas describe it in different ways as to what this word actually means. Yogo hi prabhava apyayo. So there, that yoga is what Neetaji was mentioning about, this yoga kshema vahami aham that is described. That is the yoga. So at that point, he gets a yoga. What is that yoga at that point? Prabhavaha and apyayaha. Prabhava means creation of something or the emergence of something. Apyaya means destruction of something. So from a soul's perspective, at that point, when he is in deep contemplation, everything is shut off and the soul itself has opened up and the third eye is awakened, emergence or the creation of bliss and destruction of sorrow. That happens to the jiva at that point. So here, acharyas will describe that yoga. You also have to understand, when we say in the Vedanta Sutra, the definition of the Supreme Brahman is Janmadhyasya Yataha, he who is the creator and he who is the destroyer of the universe. Yeah. So when you think about that idea and when you contemplate that this Brahman is this Janmadhyasya Yataha, the more you contemplate of Brahman like that, certain schools of Vedanta will say, when you contemplate Brahman like that, you will have creation of bliss and the destruction of sorrow. That is what Bhagavanta will do for us. Okay. Tam yogamiti manyante stiram indriya dharanam apramattaha tada bhavati yogo hi prabhavapyayo. And then, of course, he reminds us here naiva vacha na manasa praptum shakyate shakyo na chakshusha asti iti bruvato anyatra katam tad upalabhyate. Okay, so here we know, we've discussed this already. Na eva vacha, na manasa praptum. Just talking simply, you and me doing satsang is helpful, but just talking and hearing is not going to get us to that state of apramattaha tada bhavati. Yeah. Just mind alone, you cannot reach. Okay. Eyes, of course, you cannot reach this. Okay. So when again Yama comes back to this and say naiva vacha na manasa praptum shakyo na chakshuhu chakshusha, he puts a very, very important starting point for us. Yeah. Asti iti bruvato anyatra katham tad upalabhyate. Okay. So I just want to spend the rest of today's 10 or 15 minutes to talk about what is this asti that Yama is talking about. It is such an amazing word, asti. And again, it gives you the whole summary of Vedic philosophy. This is the greatness of Upanishads and our Vedas, that once you look at a particular word and it opens up several ideas. Okay, so we'll come to that. So again, now naiva vacha na manasa praptam shakye na chakshuhu. We all know that because not only Yama says that, all other Upanishads say the same thing, always worth reciting. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha Taittiriya Upanishad. Kata Upanishad itself has said, Ashabdam, Asparsham, Arupam, Avyayam, Tata, Arasam, Nityam, Agandavachayat. Keno Upanishad, the same thing. Natatra, Chakshur Gachati, Navag Gachati, no Manaha, Na Vidmaha, Na Vijanimo, Yad Etad Anushishyat. Exactly the same verse. Yeah. So all the Upanishads talk about this. So now the question is, if we cannot see him, if we cannot reach him through our mind and so on, why bother? Why do we do all this? If using any of this, we can't do it, then what is the purpose? Okay. So to answer that question, immediately, Yama puts this next line. Asti iti bruvato anyatra katam tad upalabhyate. So, asti iti bruvato anyatra katam tad upalabhyate. He says, yes, you cannot see him through your material eyes. You cannot see him through your material mind. You cannot, grasp him through speech because he is non-material. Correct. That's right. But you can still grasp him. The idea there is you can grasp, but you cannot grasp him fully. That is the idea. You can grasp him. When our Taittiriya Upanishad says, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha, the way you read that is, he cannot be contemplated fully by your mind because your mind is limited. You cannot describe him because even the infinite Vedas can't do that fully. Yeah, so that is the idea there. That is one idea there. But then, if you do want to grasp him based on your own capacity, you need to start somewhere. And Yama puts a very, very beautiful verse, and he says, Asti iti bruvato anyatra katam tad upalabhyate. So let's look at this. This is, as I said, this is an amazing concept or idea of Asti. Paramatma, Bhagavanta, the very first thing we should contemplate about him is Asti. Asti. What does that Asti actually mean? So one literal meaning of Asti is, it is there, God exists. That is the very first concept. Okay. For those who don't believe in God, nobody is going to waste time having a conversation with them because they have lost they feel that there is no God. So when they feel there is no God, there is no way in which they're going to attain God or reach God. Yeah, that is closed. Chapter closed for them. Full stop. But for others, you may be an agnostic or you may be a believer. Yeah. For you, the starting point should be Asti iti bruvato. First thing you have to understand is he is Asti. Okay. So who wants to take up these beautiful verses 439 and explain to us as to how Krishna in 439 actually brings this idea? Yeah. Who wants to go do that, please? 439. Okay, no worries. So that particular verse, as you know, is Shraddhavan labate jnanam tatparaha Samyatendriyaha jnanam labdva param shantim achirena adhigacchati. Shraddhavan labate jnanam. That Shraddha is faith. What is that faith? Faith about Paramatma exists, that the God exists. That is the first point. But the Ashraddha Danaha, he talks about the ones who don't have faith, they are finished. Whereas the one that have faith, they start the process. So that Shraddha is important. That is the idea of Asti. That is, it is there, God exists. You have this faith. Okay. So next the question is, Yama himself answers, he is there. Okay, big deal. How is he there? What is it about him that makes us wonder as to he is Asti? Okay. The second approach there is, how does he exist? How does he exist? And Yama says, Asti. He exists as Asti. Okay. You need to understand these two ideas first before you make philosophical and spiritual journey. Remember, Vedic knowledge is not religious knowledge. Vedic knowledge is philosophical, spiritual knowledge. And our Yama is asking that should be the beginning of your philosophical journey towards the Supreme Brahman. That first you know him as Asti, that he exists, and you also know him as Asti. Okay? So what is that Asti? Let us open it up. A plus ST plus I. That is Asti, literally. Okay. So let us take the middle word, ST. ST is the shortened version of Sat. Sat becomes St. Yeah. What is Sat? Sat is that which exists. Yeah. That is very easy. That which exists is Sat. So monkeys, donkeys, cows, you and me and tree and dog and stone and wood, everything exists. So they are all Sat in a way. Okay. Whereas this guy is A plus St. The A there stands for Adhika. He is Sat, but his Sattva, his Sattvatva or his reality is in an entirely different plane. He is Adhika Sat. So you need to have that knowledge, and that knowledge is what I stands for. Ingata is knowledge. Okay? So knowing that God exists and that he is Asti in the sense that his reality is in an entirely different platform. Okay, that is the idea of Asti there. That should be your starting point. That he is there, but he is in a different level compared to me. Okay? Look at the clear wordings of Yama here. Yeah. So again, who wants to take up 1723? So Suresh, 1723, do you want to take up this verse that also talks about, gives us an idea of how this Brahman should be known?
Om Tatsaditi Nirdesho Brahmanas Trividas Smrutaha Brahmanastena Vedascha Yajnascha Vitah Pura.
Thank you, Suresh. So that is another, in 1723, Krishna said, Om Tat Sat Iti Nirdesha. People call me in three names. One is Om is, the other one is Tat, and the third one is Sat. Okay. That Sat has got so many meanings in Vedic philosophy. Yeah. One meaning of Sat is existence. Yeah. That which exists is Sat. Yes, there are lots of other things also that exist. So anybody wants to give us some idea of what are the other meanings of Sat that we have learned over the months? When Taittiriya Upanishad says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, that Sat is got a meaning. When Chandogya Upanishad says Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asid Ekameva Advitiyam, I've got that word there below as well. That Sat means a different thing. So the Sat has various meanings. Anybody wants to contribute here about the meanings of Sat? Okay, no worries. So the one meaning is that which exists. But as I said, even stones also exist. So what does that Sat mean? The Sat is, the another meaning of Sat is Nirdushta, that which has no defects. That is another meaning of Sat. Okay. So there are many things that are Sat, but they are not really Sat, because you and me, we have so many defects. But there is only one entity that is without defects, and that is also called Sat, because he is Nirdushta. That is Doshadura. And by the corollary of it is Gunapurna, abode of all infinite auspicious attributes. Yeah. So that Sat there opens up like that. And here in this particular verse, when we look at Asti, the Sat there gives you an entirely different aspect of this Brahman as to how he is Asti. He's Sat, but actually he is Asti. He is Adhika Sat. Yeah, the knowledge that we know that this Sat is Adhika Sat is Asti. So these are the two primary requirements. God exists, but he is so high, he's so big. Yeah, so that is what Shvetashvatar Upanishad says. So let's do these verses. They're amazing verses. Sat eva somya idamagra asid ekameva advitiyam. Yeah, Chandogya, we have done this verse. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Salila eko drashta advaito bhavati. That Advaita, this Advitiyam, has got nothing to do with the monistic philosophy, where they themselves think that they are God. But that is not what Yama is telling here. You have to know him as exist, and you have to know him as he's an independent existence which is far superior to yourself. So when I say Ekam Eva Advitiyam, what I actually mean is Eka and Eva gives you the idea of uniqueness, his lordship, his uniformity of presence everywhere. There is no difference between his Bimba Rupa inside as an Antaryaman, his Avatara Rupas, or his Vyuha Rupas, or his all other infinite forms. Yeah, there is no difference. Advitiyam there actually means none like him, and none superior to him. Okay, so when you look at Shvetashvatar Upanishad, that is exactly that we do. Today morning we were doing this verse. Natat samashta abhi adhikashta drishyate parasya shaktihir vividaiva shruyate swabhaviki jnana balakriyacha. So these are all categorical statements. When Chandogya says Advitiyam, what it means is Natat samashta. There is nobody equal to him. Abhi adhikashta. There is nobody who is superior to him. That is how you understand Advitiyam. Not to say that nothing else exists, only him. All others are illusory or mithya. That is not the rendering in other schools of Vedanta. And I hope you find interesting as to how you link Asti with Advitiyam and how Shvetashvatar Upanishad talks about the same thing. And look at Gita 11:43. Anybody wants to take this? It's a beautiful verse. Who wants to go for 11:43?
I can try.
Yeah, go for it.
Pitasi lokasya characharasya tvamasya pujyascha gurur gariyan natvat samostya bhyudita kutonyaha lokatrayepya pratima prabhava.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. So exactly the same words as what Shvetashvatar Upanishad said. Natat samashta abhi adhikashta drishyate na tvat samo asti abhi adhikaha. Yeah, so these are all clear words. I don't know how certain people forget these words. These are categorical statements that clearly tell us that when Yama says asti iti bruvataho anyatra, asti iti bruvato anyatra, anyatra means all others. Compared to all others, he is asti. Asti means he is high. Adhika sat. So compared to all other things in the universe, he is the highest. Think about that. That is the first step to philosophical journey. So then he says the same thing. Asti iti eva upalabdhasya. We'll finish this off. Asti iti eva upalabdhavyas tattva bhavena cha ubayoho. Asti iti eva upalabdhasya tattva bhavaha prasidati. So very, very interesting words. I've underlined all this. Asti again comes twice. That is why I had to spend some time in the previous slide to give us an idea of what that asti actually means, because Yama uses asti 3 times. Yeah, asti iti eva upalabdhavyaha. Remember these words again. I put it in color coded them for our benefit. Upalabdhavyaha, upalabdhasya. So there are 2 different words there. Upalabdhavyaha, upalabdhavasya, upalabdhasya. Okay. Tattva bhavena, tattva bhavaha. Okay. Cha ubayoho prasidati. We come to this prasidati of grace that Shilaji was mentioning, because Yama comes to that. So once we have understood this asti is that reality which is supreme reality, then we can make progress. Okay. Upalabdhavyaha. Okay. Asti iti eva upalabdhavyaha means he should be known. Upalabdhavyaha there means he should be primarily to be known as asti. Okay. So, and Yama stresses this, upalabdhavyaha, iti eva. Look at those words. Eva, as I said, it stresses, it's so important. to understand this, that this Brahman is asti iti eva upalabdavyaha. The first step is know that Brahman is the highest reality. Okay. Highest reality compared to whom? Ubayoho. He has made a categorical statement there. He is higher than the other two categories of existence. Okay. What are the other two categories of existence? And that we have done on so many sessions. Yeah. So Shvetashvatara Upanishad is the beginning point of our Vedic philosophy, which gives the classification of all of existence. It says there is the Nya or the Chetanas or the soul. Then there is the Jada or the matter. Then there is this Deva who is Brahman. Those are all the three entities out there. Okay. This Brahman is different from these two. Those two are these two. Ubayoho, there is Chetana, Jivas, and matter. Okay. So he is different from these two, is the first idea. The next one is Tattva Bhavena. Tattvam Bhavayati. Okay. So what that means is Bhavayati means Niyati, that it controls these two. Yeah, these two tattvas, this one controls, this asti controls these two tattvas. Nya, Agnyau, Dvav, Anishau, Shara, Atmanau, Ishate, Deva Ekaha. This is the verse for this. Ishate is Tattva Bhavayati. So again, the idea of independence of Brahman and the dependence of all else, the jivas and matter. How does he do all this? We know this eightfold dispensation that Brahman does to the universe of Jada and Jiva. So who wants to tell us this very briefly? Perhaps maybe I could call upon Suresh to do this, because we have this definition of Janmadhyasya Yataha, right? And what is that creation, etc. of Brahman? What does he do? And I've listed this here. So do you want to take this up, Suresh?
Yeah, that's the eightfold dispensation of Brahman, which is Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara, then Niyamana, Jnana, Ajnana, Bandha, Moksha. So it's creation, maintenance, destruction. Ajnana is a part of it as well. Then it goes into Jnana, Ajnana, then Bandha, and he binds it and also liberates us, gives us moksha and liberates us. So those are the eightfold dispensations.
Thank you, Suresh. So among the eightfold dispensation, the first four applies to both jivas and jadas. The pot is created, the pot is maintained, the pot then destroys the pot. You can do stuff with it. Yeah. So pot is also done this. For us, our creation is having this body. Yeah. And then, of course, the jivas, the sentient beings, have a totally different things. Ajnana leads to bandha. Jnana leads to moksha. So Jnana, Ajnana, Bandha, Moksha. So all those things you need to think about it when Yama says Tattva Bhavena. Okay. Tattva Bhavena cha ubayoho. Yeah. Tattvam Bhavena, independence. So this Brahman is independent. That is the idea there. And he is Asti Anyatra. He is supreme independence compared to all else. Okay. So you can now guess where I'm getting at, because our chapter 15, verse 16, 17, and 18, which are such key verses of Vedic philosophy, they talk about this. And that is why some of us some schools consider these three verses as foundational of Vedic philosophy. So who wants to recite this for all of us today, please?
Yeah. Sorry, I can go with.
Sorry.
Dvavimau purushau loke ksharakshara eva cha ksharas sarvani bhutani kutastho uchyate uttamah purushastvanyah paramatmetyudavritah yo lokatrayamavishya vibhartavyaya ishvarah paramat Yasmat ksharamati toham aksharaadapi chottamah atosmi loke vedecha pratitah purushottamah.
Beautiful, Veenaji. So these verses are categorical of Gita, and exactly Yama is also saying the same thing. And again, we have done it a million times, saying that whenever you do Yama's verse in Kata Upanishad, search for a verse in Gita because it will be there. So Purushottama is this independent being who Yama calls as Asti Asti iti Bruvato, Anyatra. Who are the Anyatras? The Anyatras are defined in Gita. You have Kutastha Akshara, which is Chetana Prakriti. Then you have the Akshara, other Ksharas. The Ksharas are two categories there. One is the matter which gets dissolved, of course, during dissolution, and the Jivas who constantly keep shedding their bodies. Yeah. So these two are all Ksharas, the Jivas and matter. And then you have the Kutastha Akshara, then you have the Purushottama. So this Purushottama should be understood as Asti, as an independent existence. Yeah, that is the first requirement. First, you should contemplate that he exists. If you don't contemplate he doesn't exist, you don't stand a chance. Once you know that he exists, you don't consider him as he is some useless, zero, empty entity. No, he is Asti. He is a supreme, independent entity that controls the whole of existence. Is the next idea that you need to develop. Yeah. So next Yama will say, Asti iti upalabdasya. Okay. He who has grasped this idea that this Brahman is Asti iti upalabdasya, Tattva Bhavaha prasidati. Yeah. Tattva Bhavaha there means the Supreme Narayana is the Tattva Bhavaha. Yeah. Because he Tattvam Bhavayati iti Tattva Bhavaha. That is how you derive that. Okay. He controls all tattvas, so he is called Tattva Bhava. So when you know him, that he is Asti, and when you get that knowledge that Asti iti eva upalabdhasya, Tattva Bhavaha prasidati. Okay, prasidati, no confusion there. He is pleased. He bestows his grace upon us. When does he do that? When he is known as Asti. When we have attained that knowledge, then we know that he will be pleased at some point. And that is why Purusha Shukta says, Tam evam vidwan amrita iha bhavati. Na anyaha pantaha ayanaya vidyate. Tam evam vidwan. Tam evam, knowing this Supreme Paramatma like this only. Tam evam vidwan amrita iha bhavati. That is exactly what Yama is saying, that you know him as Asti and Asti. Okay. Na ayamatma pravachanena labhyaha na medaya na bahuna shutena yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha tasya esha atma vivrunute tanun swam. You have to do all this, but yes, of course, there is his grace, and he will decide, okay, this fellow has worked hard. I will now shed my grace upon him. I will destroy all the karmic imprints that he has got. I will give him a darshan of me as his antaryaman. I will give him aparoksha jnana. Once he has had aparoksha jnana, he can finish off his prarabdha karma. Then he will move to Satyaloka and be with Chaturmukha. When Chaturmukha finishes his innings, then he will go into my womb. And then when there is the next creation, he will join moksha, and all others will go to samsara. So this is the process that the Vedic philosophy tells us. And again, of course, Jayatirtha has done this, right? He can be only known through the Vedas. Brahma Mimamsa or Brahma Sutra should be used to understand the Vedas. He is to be known as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects. Unless we know him, we cannot see him. Unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. And of course, his grace is required at all steps. God's grace is absolutely essential for release from bondage. Asti iti eva upalabdhasya tattva bhavaha prasidati. Okay. Now the question is, how do we know that we have obtained his grace? So Devalji at some point mentioned this, as to how do I know what is going to happen to me? So similarly, the question arises, how do we know that we have got divine grace? Okay. So we will tackle this in the next class. I had a couple of slides, but we can do it in the next class. I think the context will be good for next class as to how do we know that we've actually got God's grace? Because Yama will give us some clues. So with that clue, we can actually try and understand whether we are getting God's grace or not. Okay. So we'll deal with that in the next class. And what I'm going to suggest is Krishna Pranamastu here. And I'm going to say, that next week, we are going to finish Kata Upanishad because there are not many verses there. So we got Yada Sarve, these are all the verses that we have. Then we have the Shanti Mantra. Then actually there are only 3 more verses here. And including the 2 more, we have only 5 verses to do. And these verses are all just giving you some, what is happening here, what happens to Nachiketa afterwards. Once Nachiketa has listened to Yama, what happens to him is discussed in this verse. And then, of course, the Shanti Mantra, you close off with the Shanti Mantra. Yeah, which, as you know, for 34 weeks, I've always recited this Shanti Mantra. So actually, we will spend some time to understand what this Shanti Mantra is. And then we will close Kata Upanishad tomorrow, in the next week. So I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it because I'll miss Kata Upanishad. We have done it for 1 year and 2 months, but we will aim to finish it next Sunday. And also what I'm going to be suggesting here is the following Sunday, I think we should all make an effort to team up and do a workshop on Kata Upanishad, because after all, we have spent 14 months learning Kata Upanishad. So what we can do in a fortnight's time is we spend an hour and a half, and we get 5 to 6 folks, pick up some key ideas, concepts of Kata Upanishad that we have learned, and then present that in a logical sequence, i.e. starting from the first Adhyaya, various Vallis, and close with the second Adhyaya, third Valli. Okay, so we will complete our Kata Upanishad that way over the next 2 weeks. And then afterwards, let's go, as I've given a hint before, after that, we will do chapter 17th of Gita. And then after chapter 17 of Gita is done, then I want to make a pravesha to Shukla Yajurveda, and we will do Ishavasya Upanishad or Isha Upanishad as it's called, or Yagniya Mantro Upanishad or Mantro Upanishad. So we will look at that particular Upanishad of 18 verses. It's a short Upanishad, but of course pregnant with thought. So that's the stream of thought here. So Krishna Pranamastu, and we'll catch up next week unless there are any pressing questions.
Madhu, can I ask a question?
Yes, Devalji.
So, a linga, you introduce the word, but the colloquial understanding of the word linga is gender, but you've taken it differently. So, is that like a Sanskrit meaning of the word?
Yeah, absolutely, Devalji. If you go to Sanskrit dictionary and put linga, it'll give you empty number of meanings about linga. And of course, let's not forget Shiva Linga also. So linga, gender, and then linga, tarka. So there are so many meanings for linga. Yeah, you're right. But always, as I said before, you need to take that in context. Yeah, because Sanskrit, as you know, is a very elastic language, and each word will have several meanings. Yeah, and you just need to put it in context as to what is being discussed. So, and then understand that that is the meaning.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. So Harish ji, take us through Om and we'll close today's session. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a good week. We'll catch up next Sunday. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru.